Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 690, Monday, February the 11th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, we got some things to get to today to cover everything that happened on Sunday, and quite a bit happened. And then, of course, we'll get to the dumbass of the week. We'll find out who won that coveted award here momentarily. First, let's talk about probably the biggest story that came out on Sunday. Actually, it may have come out on Saturday. I'm not sure exactly what day the story was actually posted up to the Hill. But John Solomon wrote a really great article, and he's I think it's a signal that we're turning the corner. And I mentioned this a couple days ago in a video that once the Mueller probe is over, we've had these House investigation, the Senate investigation, multiple committees in these two bodies in Congress. We had Rodenstein coming out and making his statement. We've had many media figures, including Mr. Isikoff, who was at the very beginning of the Spygate story, or TowerGate story, whatever you want to call it. He has even come out and admitted in recent weeks that there probably isn't anything there. Of course, I know Peter's been stroking us, didn't think there was any there. So, as I said, once you get through all these things, have all come out and said, okay, we've had these investigations, there's no evidence of Trump-Russia. The last thing that we're really waiting for, of course, is Uncle Bob's report. And, of course, we know that Uncle Bob's report is most likely going to be Uncle Bob coming out and saying that the Russians meddled in our elections and that we need to have, put in some safeguards in place and to watch the Russians and make sure they don't meddle in our elections anymore. That's essentially what's going to be in his report. He's not going to find any evidence that Trump or anyone on Trump's team, campaign team, any way, shape, or form was involved in any type of a Trump-Russia conspiracy. This is going to be blown away once Uncle Bob finally submits that report. And I expect Mr. Barr is maybe going to get him to speed it up a little bit. So once all this is gone, then that's going to beg the obvious question. Okay, so if there was no Trump-Russia collusion, then whatever made us believe that there was? People are going to start asking questions. Why did we have all these investigations, spend all this money, exhaust all this time? Why did we keep half the country dreaming and believing that this was all going to be true and that the orange Hitler was going to be taken out of office because he got caught colluding with the Russians? And once all this has been gone away and we have all these questions to answer, why did we go through all this? And then people are going to have to finally focus on, okay, let's dig into exactly how we got here. And then they're going to have to go back and look at the dossier, how that all came about, the FISA warrants, the O'Connor's lures, all these other things that went on are then going to be unearthed. And so, as I said, we are beginning to get to that point where we're now turning the corner. So John Solomon's article in The Hill is essentially getting an early jump on where we're going to be 3 or 4 months down the road once Uncle Bob's report comes out. And keep in mind, Huckleberry Horowitz will be releasing his report, and he's looking into the FISA stuff as well. So we'll get Huckleberry Horowitz's report probably within a couple of weeks of the Mueller report. And this is all going to put this whole thing to rest as far as Trump-Russia. But that still leaves this question in the air, is why did we go through all this? So as a lot of people know, the way the Democrats, right out of the book of Saul Alinsky, the way they operate is you take the very thing that you are doing and you blame it on your opponent. This simultaneously puts your opponent on the defensive and insulates you. So this is just an Alinsky tactic that was put into play against Trump. And now that it's run its course and it's failed, or will fail, then we'll reach the next logical conclusion. So this is kind of what's driving this article by John Solomon. So it's over at thehill.com. You can Google that and read it for yourself if you'd like. I'm going to go through just a couple of the main points he makes and then his final thoughts on the subject. So John Solomon basically says that the Right Reverend Clinton worked with Russian leaders, including Sergei Lavrov and Dmitry Medvedev, to create U.S. technology partnerships with Skolkovo, S-K-O-L-K-O-V-E, Skolkovo. Skolkovo is kind of like the Russians' version of Silicon Valley. Okay, so the Right Reverend Clinton worked with Lavrov and Medvedev to create this U.S. technology partnership with Skolkovo. Now, Russia's as I said, it's Russia's version of Silicon Valley. Now, this occurred at the exact same time that Slick Willie, her husband, was being paid $500,000 for a speech in Russia. Bill Clinton also, at that time that he was on that trip to Russia, asked for permission to meet with Arkady Dvorkovich. And of course, Dvorkovich was the head of Rosatom. That is the company that was seeking to buy Uranium-1. Bill Clinton also wanted to meet with Viktor Vekselberg, who is, of course, the head of this whole Skolkovo technology center in Russia. So he had asked, because you have to ask permission to meet with these people, typically. And that's exactly what he did through the State Department, where his wife was, of course, head of that State Department. She was the Secretary of State at that time. So while all this is happening, of course, these Russian oligarchs involved in both Uranium-1 and Skolkovo were making large donations to the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative, somewhere in the range of $145 to $160 billion, depending on who you believe. Now, the Rotten Reverend Clinton also hired Fusion GPS through the cutout law firm Perkins Coie. Of course, Fusion was representing a Russian company, Prevazon, who was working with the Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya. Fusion's co-partner Glenn Simpson also had deep connections to the Russians and working for the Russians previously. The Rotten Reverend Clinton, of course, hired Fusion GPS to conduct the opposition research on Trump, which, of course, brought into play many Russian actors. So, the title of that of the story by Solomon is "The Case for Russia Collusion Against the Democrats." So clearly you can see he lays out, while there is no evidence of collusion with Trump and the Russians, we can see just from these three major examples of how Clinton, while working as Secretary of State, was working both with the oligarchs who were trying to buy Uranium-1, the oligarchs who were trying to get American technology, and she helped them do that. And also putting together the dossier, using all these Russian players and cutouts and things and such. So he makes a pretty strong case that while there's no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, there's plenty of evidence of collusion between the Rotten Reverend Clinton, the Democrats, and the Russians. So the conclusion that he draws is that there is clear evidence that shows that Hillary Clinton's family and charity profited from Moscow and simultaneously facilitated official government actions benefiting Russia that have raised security concerns. And also, there is irrefutable evidence that Hillary's opposition research effort on Trump, one that inspired the FBI probe, was carried out by people who got information from Russia and were consorting with the Russians. So yes, John Solomon is absolutely right. As we turn the corner on Trump-Russia, and that is buried as nothing more than a myth, and we begin to ask the questions why and how that all got started, this is the road that we will be going down next. And for the next 2 years leading up to 2020, it will be exposing the crimes that were associated with these things that were happening. Because, again, the whole thing with Trump-Russia was a hoax. A hoax. But they used all this stuff from the Rotten Reverend Clinton that she was paying for. Remember, she owned the dossier. She owned it. She commissioned it. She paid for it. Therefore, she's responsible for it. Do you think the Rotten Reverend Clinton did not know how the dossier was being used? If you paid, let's just say, for example, you're in a political battle and you decide to get some opposition research on your opponent and you pay $1 million or so for that research, you're going to want to know the status of that research as you're moving along. You're going to, of course, know that you own that information. It's yours, and you'll be the one to make the decisions. The people who you hired to do the research may report back to you, but ultimately, you're not going to have the people who are doing this opposition research that you're paying for out passing it off to everybody in town, including into half a dozen different back doors into the FBI. You're not going to have all that going on without your knowing about it, giving the permission, or participating in it. So the idea that the rotten Reverend Clinton was just sitting back paying for the dossier and didn't know that it was being spread all over Washington through the media circle, knowing good and well this is exactly what Fusion does. That's what you pay them for. They dig up dirt and mix in a bunch of lies with a little bit of truth. They take a little bit of truth and they wrap a million lies around it, and then they pay journalists to run the stories. That's why you got to pay them $1 million, because they got to pay reporters to run the garbage. And then you've got the stuff being pumped in through the back door, the side door, through the roof, through the chimney, under the floor. It's coming in from every direction into the FBI and the intelligence community. Now, do you think that all that was going on without the rotten Reverend knowing about it? She's the custodian of the dossier. She owned it. She paid for it. She was responsible for it. You think she didn't know that it was being moved through all these channels? Not only did she have to know, she had to have given her permission, her thumbs up, and was almost certainly the guiding hand behind it, the one driving it. That is where we're going to end up when we get to the bottom of this rat hole. And so John Solomon is basically he's basically turning the corner on the story. We can see now where this story is now going to begin to change, and all the facts and all the information that we've been covering here on TowerGate for nearly 2 years that's just been kind of floating around out there, it's all eventually going to be completely crystallized. More of the information will come out. It will finally find its narrative as the old narrative goes away and the new narrative comes along. In this new narrative, all these things will happen, and eventually, in 2 years from now, hopefully there'll be plenty of people who were involved in a lot of crimes being indicted and facing justice for their crimes. And they were big crimes. Alrighty, so have a look at that article by John Solomon in thehill.com. Amy Klobuchar is now dropped her name into the hat to be the Democratic nominee to challenge Trump in 2020. She's, of course, from Minnesota. And Amy Klobuchar's got a few problems. The biggest problem she's got is no one really likes her very much. She's got a reputation as being a bitch. And that's not my word. That's the words used by Democrats and staffers who know her and have worked with her. She is a bitch. She's a very nasty woman. No one really likes her that much. She also was one of the most abusive individuals involved in the Kavanaugh hearings. She was probably went for his throat as much as anyone and jumped on board with the whole hang Kavanaugh, string up Kavanaugh thing that they had going on. She was a tip of the spear in every bit of that. Now, she has another problem, which is that it appears that based on her speech and based on what I read, how she's going to try to frame her campaign, she's going to try to walk the line between the crazy loony left and the centrist. She's going to try to walk that line between centrism and far leftism. The problem is you simply can't do that. They're too far apart. They're not that close. You know, abolish ICE is so far to the left that it's hard to make that a centrist position. It's hard to make post-birth abortion a centrist position. It's hard to make leave the borders wide open and support sanctuary cities into a centrist position. She's either going to have to go left or go center. She can't. There's too big of a gap for her to try to muddy that up. Plus, the fact of the matter is, we can see that with the current state of the Democratic Party, the farther the left you are, the more successful you're going to be with the base. Right now, the base is hard left. Now, maybe she thinks there's enough of these centrist types that'll carry the day for her. But I don't think it will. If you look at what all the other candidates are doing, they are racing hard to the left. And the ones who even aren't really that far to the left, like Gillibrand, are having to go to the left and abandon some of the more centrist positions. They know where they have to go to win the nomination. We're not talking about the general election here. Now, obviously, in the general, both Klobuchar and Gillibrand would be making the right move to try to become centrist. But the problem is you got to win the nomination first in the Democratic Party, and you will not win the nomination of the Democratic Party trying to run as a centrist. That's the Right Reverend Clinton's plan. That's what she did, and clearly that was rejected. Clearly, to win the Democratic primary, you're going to have to go hard left. Now, the corporate Democratic Party and the big donors are going to try to rig this and make sure that that the hard left goes out there and raises lots of money and gets lots of energy, and then at the last minute or before the convention, they're going to do something to try to get a more centrist person in there. And that may be why they're plugging Klobuchar and Gillibrand in, is to make sure that they got a couple people who they can lean a little bit centrist and try to have them come in and close the deal at the end and screw the left-wingers like Bernie's people, and that's really who these people are, come in and screw them in the end, just like what they did in 2016. We'll see how that's going to work out for the Democrats, but to me it looks like it's going to be a train wreck. I just don't know how this is not the normal situation in the Democratic Party where you have some blue dogs and you have some people in the center and then you have some people that are more to the left. This is that we are in uncharted waters in the Democratic Party. The left of the Democratic Party today is much greater than it has been in the past. It's probably 40%, maybe 50%, maybe more. And it is hard left. It is hard left. You can't walk that back into centrism. It's just not doable. It's not doable. So I think it's going to be a train wreck, and I don't think their plan's going to work. And I'm not sure who's going to end up being the nominee, and I'm still pretty certain that the Right Reverend Clinton is looking for a way to angle her way into the mix. I have no doubt in my mind she has every intention of trying to somehow worm her way in this thing. We'll just have to watch and see. Well, it looks like both of Justin Fairfax, he's the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, looks like, and of course tomorrow there's going to be impeachment hearings brought against him by a Democrat in the Virginia House. So it looks like both of Justin Fairfax's accusers, both of them, are going to be willing to speak at his impeachment hearings if he allows it to go on. Now, typically when they bring impeachment papers, that's the final note to you to resign, step down. They really don't want to go through the process. It's very damaging to the party, to everyone around, including the person being impeached. You're better off not to let it go that far. You're better off to walk away and then try to rebuild your career in some other way. Going through the impeachment hearing that's a death knell. You can never come back from that. It's a really bad move by this lieutenant governor. He should have taken the exit door a week ago and started rebuilding his reputation. Instead, now, by doing what he's doing, he'll be forced out and he may never get back in the door again. But it appears, and especially if they bring these two women in who say they're willing to testify against him in these impeachment hearings. Well, we had CNN's Erin Burnett. She had Jeff Merkley on, and she was challenging him on what Donald Trump said in his State of the Union about socialism. And so, of course, Jeff Merkley praises socialism. He was a co-sponsor of that crazy bill that Cortez put up, the Communist Manifesto. So Erin Burnett was trying to give him an opportunity to walk this back and say, yeah, I mean, we're not for full-blown socialism, but he would never do it. He would never do it. And you could see the look on her face. Even CNN, Erin Burnett, hard left as you can get, hardcore anti-Trumper, even she realizes that a socialist platform for the Democratic Party is death nails. And that's the impression she wanted to give. She wanted to give him the opportunity to walk it back. And he wouldn't. And she was like, she gave him the opportunity, and he did not take advantage of it to walk back to socialism. And you could see at the end of the interview, she looked pretty troubled because she's like thinking, oh my God, the Democrats really are going to go socialist. Oh my God. She realizes that it's just not politically viable, at least not in 2020, 2019, whatever. It's just not, it's not viable. Maybe, hopefully, never in this country. Mark Sandmann's lawyer says that Nathan Phillips will be sued for his defamatory lies. He will be sued for his defamatory lies. So they are actually, I've seen a list of all these other people that were going to sue, going after people with a lot of money, Hollywood celebrities, media organizations, media outlets, journalists, and things like that. But I never saw his name dropped. But now it looks like, yes, they are going to sue Nathan Phillips for his defamatory lies against Mr. Sandmann. Lindsey Graham was on Maria Bartiromo on Sunday morning, and she pressed him on the investigations he's going to do. And Lindsey Graham, again, has stated that he will pursue subpoenas to Comey, Lynch, Yates, and all the other people who signed off on the FISAs, 4 of them. He told Maria Bartiromo, he's going to get to the bottom of the FISA, which means he is going to, he says, subpoena everyone who signed off on the FISAs. And that should be interesting. Of course, these will likely be closed door because it's dealing with FISA. It'll be behind the scenes. We won't see what happens, but we'll see what happens there and what kind of report comes out of Lindsey Graham. And he says that this will be happening simultaneously while Mr. Barr should be doing his investigation. He said there'll be parallel investigations, but ultimately he said when he finishes that he will give his final report and his recommendation to the Attorney General, and he very may well recommend, of course, there be charges or indictments or whatever for these people involved in the FISA abuse. And certainly there should be. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They were lying to the FISA court, withholding exculpatory information, withholding material evidence from the FISA court, manipulating people within the Justice Department. Mr. Baker says he didn't know about the ORs. Wonder what Sally Yates is going to say. Wonder what Loretta Lynch is going to say. Wonder what Comey is going to say. Did they know about the ORs? And what about Christopher Steele? Is he going to interview him? There's a lot of questions here, and questions that you don't want to answer if you're caught up in this thing. So I would say that this is probably moving in the right direction, but we'll keep watching it every step of the way, and we'll keep our eye closely peeled on Lindsey Graham to hold his feet to the fire. Mick Mulvaney was on Fox News with Rat Boy Chris Wallace, and he said that Trump will take in the deal whatever he can get from this deal that they're working on, which they have to come to the conclusion by Friday, by the 15th. And as far as money for the wall, he's going to try to take the deal, even if the amount of money he wants is not there. He'll take whatever money is there. Right now, I'm hearing the number 2.8 or something like that. Trump wants 5.7. But Mulvaney says, yeah, okay, well, if it'll get the deal done, we'll take the 2.8 in the deal, and then he'll go find the rest of the 5.7 somewhere else. Because the money is there. There are other places he can get it, and it doesn't require a national emergency. So he said it's likely they will find a way to sign that deal, as long as the Democrats don't throw something in the bill that makes it impossible for him to support, which they very likely might do, just to create the controversy. Mulvaney also says that there is an official investigation and a deep search going on right now for the person that leaked Trump's schedule. They're really upset about that, apparently, within the White House. Very upset. They want to find out who that mole is who leaked Trump's schedule. And apparently there's an active effort going on right now, and they plan on getting to the bottom of that and finding out who that mole was. And, of course, we had this idiot John Lewis. Of course, he's trying to get Trump's tax returns. And, of course, this is not the first time this has been done. It's been tried before by both parties, quite honestly. And we always get the same resolution, which is that, you're protected. Your privacy rights are protected not to have to release your tax returns as a U.S. citizen. And that includes the president and vice president. The president and vice president do not have to submit their tax returns to Congress or anyone else. Now, the fact of the matter is, as far as John Lewis, I don't know if he knows this or not, but the IRS automatically audits the president and the vice president's taxes every year. The president and the vice president get a tax audit from the IRS every single year that they are serving in those two offices. But as far as getting the Trump's tax returns released to these committees, they're crazy. It ain't going to happen. They're barking up the wrong tree. And of course, John Lewis is not the sharpest tool in the shed, so maybe he thinks that he can use subpoena power or whatever. I don't know what he thinks he's got, but this has been challenged. I've probably been down this road half a dozen times from both sides wanting this, but it always ends up the same, which is the president receives the same protections as every other American citizen and your right to privacy, and that includes your tax returns, because there's lots of personal information in your tax returns that are by law protected. So John Lewis and the Democrats are not going to get Trump's tax returns. They are not. And as far as if there's anything going on with Trump's tax returns, it's none of John Lewis's business. It's the business of the IRS, and they do conduct an audit on the president and the vice president, regardless of what party they're from or what year it is, every single year. It's been happening since the 1930s, I think. Long, long time that's been a policy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time now to award the Dumbass of the Week. Last week was pretty much a slam dunk. Last week was pretty much a slam dunk with the governor of Virginia. And quite honestly, he could have been on the list this week after he came up and made that speech saying, yeah, well, you know, I think I've weathered the storm, and now, just so I can really get in touch with this thing, I'm reading Roots. Reading Roots. This guy is such an a-hole, man. I can't believe it. Of course, his lieutenant general, he's in a world of trouble. And as of today, I imagine he'll introduce the impeachment papers on him. I don't see him going through with it. I think he's got to resign. If he goes through with this, he's going to be his career is destroyed. He will be destroyed. They put these two women up on the stand. He's done. He's done. He's getting very bad advice from somebody. So he was a candidate. Both these guys were candidates again for Dumbass of the Week, but they didn't get very many votes. The big vote getter this week, obviously, and the big vote getters would have been, of course, Jerry Nadler, Sheila Jackson Lee. Who else do we have here? Who got votes? I tally these all up. Nadler, Jackson Lee, Trish Anderson got a vote. Yeah, but it was really hard this week. I mean, it was pretty much dominated by Alexandria Marty Feldman's Cortez, mainly because, let's face it, she put up a communist manifesto, which she described as an environmental Green New Deal. She puts it up on a website. After 2 hours, she took so much abuse that she pulled it down, and then, still taking the abuse for putting it up and taking it down, she tried to make the accusation that it was false, fraudulent, or somebody else put a fraudulent plan up there, when in fact the metadata revealed clearly that it was put together by her chief of staff. It was created in a PDF. We can see the time it was created. We can see when it was uploaded. We know it was her website, and now she's been exposed for lying about that. So the whole thing was a disaster. Let's just face it. Marty Feldman's Alexandria Cortez, she had a very, very bad week. And then we hear at the end of the week that they're probably going to try to get her out by getting rid of her voting district. Just eliminate her district altogether and be rid of her. But she's going to do a lot of damage because she's going to be Dumbass of the Week. Probably she may top Maxine Waters and Pelosi and winning it more than even they have. And that's basically what happened this week. Is Ocasio-Cortez is going to be named Dumbass of the Week. Overwhelmingly. Let's go through this for a moment. We had Jonathan Ocasio-Cortez. Carl Jerry Nadler. Now, Jerry Nadler got he tied with Jackson Lee for second place. Both had the same number of votes. Because, of course, Jerry Nadler, Matt Whitaker kind of got him with that line, hey, you know, your 5 minutes are up. And then, of course, he looked very disheveled and pretty, I don't know, he didn't do a very good job on the hearings with Whitaker. He looked pretty much out of place, or like he was out of his league, like he didn't know what he was doing a lot of the times. He was having trouble controlling the back and forth going on between the Republicans sitting to his left and Sheila Jackson Lee. They kept constantly trying to play parliamentary rules on each other. He was stuck in the middle. It just was a shit show for the most part. And Nadler, of course, has got a serious hate on for the president. He too is going to find, just like John Lewis is going to find, that just because you're the head of the committee and you've got subpoena power doesn't mean you always get what you want. I mean, the Republicans in that position have been subpoenaing documents and witnesses for 2 years, and look what they got. So the Department of Justice isn't necessarily just going to hand over witnesses and documents to these committees headed by Democrats just because they request them. They're going to find out what the Republicans found out, which is sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. But anyway, yes, Nadler would have been a very, very good. He definitely qualified. It's just that, with the Communist Manifesto and the way that was handled, it was just too big of a challenge for Jerry Nadler to overcome, to be the dumbass of the week. But he certainly gets honorable mention. We had Jeanette, who gave us 3 choices. She went number 1, Cortez, number 2, Nadler, and number 3, Sheila Jackson Lee. So, yeah, she nailed all 3 of them. She got the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3. Vote getters right there. Major Mac went for Jerry Nadler. Yeah, Major Mac, absolutely. He certainly did a great job of trying to earn this prestigious award of Dumbass of the Week, but again, he's competing against Ocasio, Marty Feldman, Cortez, and it's a tall mountain to climb. It really is. We had some Rotden Smith. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He went for Sheila Jackson Lee. Of course, she made an ass of herself as well in those hearings. I assume that's what he's talking about. Was in her hearings, how that all went down. We had the Remembrance Rug guy who noted Trish Anderson and James Baker, certainly based probably on the story, I guess, that I talked about the day before, about the fact that they never signed off on the, they never read the FISA application, yet they signed off on it, and both of them blaming each other and everyone around them in the process and the bureaucracy and everything else, not taking responsibility for not doing their job. Certainly they could easily have been Dumbass of the Week. We had Iowa Russian for Ocasio-Cortez, Peter for Ocasio-Cortez, Bird for Ocasio-Cortez, Patty was for Jerry Nadler, Rocky for Ocasio-Cortez, Fern for Ocasio-Cortez, Douglas for Sheila Jackson Lee again. Sheila Jackson Lee, tying with Jerry Nadler for second place, and of course Ricky and Patrick both for Ocasio-Cortez. So thank you all for participating in Dumbass of the Week. I think you got it right again. I think Ocasio-Cortez, the Communist Manifesto, put up on a website, then taken down, then they claim it was a fraud when it wasn't, and it was just a huge fail, an epic fail on the part of Ocasio-Cortez and her crew, and she certainly deserves an overwhelming victory and votes for being Dumbass of the Week. Both Nadler and Jackson Lee tying, so Ocasio-Cortez had 11 votes, Nadler, Jackson Lee both getting 3 votes each to tie for second place, and of course Trish Anderson and James Baker both getting 1 vote each. So yes, it was a good competition this week, but still just nearly impossible to beat Ocasio-Cortez dropping a Communist Manifesto and then disguised as a New Green Deal, and then pulling it off of her website, and then lying about that. The whole 9 yards. It was just a freak show, a shit show, what you'd expect from her. So anyway, that's how everything went down this week. I appreciate you for participating in the Dumbass of the Week. Certainly, this is a brand new week coming up. Lots of other people have golden opportunities. I'm sure that with this crew of Democrats and the freak show circus we're watching, we'll have no shortage of great candidates for next week, and we'll of course watch all week and point these out as we go along. Thanks so much for participating in that. We'll be back again tomorrow with more TowerGate. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.